Hello everybody, and welcome to another fantastic adventure from the world of Pokémon. There are those who call me Bardbreaker, and it's time for a special Valentine's Day themed run. We've got a lot of Pokémon adventure to get through today, so let's dive right in and ask ourselves, can we beat Pokémon Diamond using only a pair of male and female Nidoran? So both forms of Nidoran are a product of Generation 1 and are honestly quite similar in base stats. The male starts at 273 and the female starts at 275, and you can see that while there are some minor differences in the individual distributions, they are essentially even across the board. They have identical special stats, and while the male Nidoran gets a slight edge in attack and speed, the female Nidoran gets the slight advantage in HP and defense. Learn set wise, you can see they're also pretty similar in overall level up moves and type coverage. The male Nidoran gets attacks that generally utilize its horn, while the female Nidoran seems to get attacks that primarily focus on its teeth and claws. Female Nidoran will eventually get a solid dark move with Crunch, while the male Nidoran will start with Peck, a handy flying type coverage for early in the game. Their TM move pool is actually quite expansive in this generation, and we have access to a wide variety of moves on both sides. In fact, their TM move pools are identical, with the one exception being that the female Nidoran can additionally learn Aerial Ace for some reason. We should be able to make good use of some of these, namely Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, and Dig. We are notably lacking any Psychic or Fire damage, and there are going to be Steel Pokemon to deal with, but that's a problem for future me to deal with. With all that in mind, guys, it's time for you to make your regular offerings of comments to Algorithm, God of the YouTube algorithm, and let him know if you think we can do this or not. I'm gonna say that we probably can, but I am worried that Steel may pose a problem. Lastly, before we begin, just a brief reminder of our rules. In battle, I can only use the Nidoran. I will need other Pokemon for HMs, but I'm not going to be allowed to use those Pokemon in battle. As always, I won't use any items in battle. Held items and items outside of battle are allowed. And lastly, aside from adjusting our starter, I won't be using any game-altering cheats, glitches, or exploits. So let's do it. So to start the run off, we find ourselves pillaging an old man's suitcase looking for subscriptions to Matlock Monthly. As instant karma would have it, Birdemic hits and we're attacked by Wild Starly. Fortunately, the old man had some Pokemon left in his briefcase and right next to the Metamucil, and we're able to defend ourselves instead of just casually walking away. I've set this run up by replacing Turtwig with the female Nidoran so we can do the whole run with it. We're able to quickly dispatch the level 2 Starly with a couple of scratches and are soon in the clear and able to leave with our rival Tim close behind. After checking in with our mommy, we head to Sandgem Town and Professor Tree allows us to keep the Pokemon we stole and we give it a nickname. I nickname her Padme. And yeah, you can probably guess what the male Nidoran's going to be called. Speaking of male Nidoran, now that we've begun the run, I go ahead and edit in a male Nidoran to our team as well so that we can do the entire run with a matched pair. In case you were wondering, I could technically get the male Nidoran organically right here on this very route between Sandgem and Twinleaf. The problem with that is they only spawn 2% of the time. And they only catchable via the Poké Radar. And you only get the Poké Radar once you've gotten the National Dex. And you only get the National Dex once you've seen the first 150 Pokemon of the Sinnoh Dex. Yeah, so that's not something you can really do until you've essentially beaten the entire game. So we're gonna just have to add it in here. Now, you'll just have to take my word for it, but I did make sure to roll random IVs for it in the editor, so just as if it had been given to us as a random encounter or our starter. Unlike some Poketubers, I don't reset for optimal IVs. I want my runs to be proof that basically any given member of a species can beat this run organically, not just a perfectly optimal one. So now that we're set with our team, it's time to proceed on. One thing that's going to bog this run down is the obvious issue of having to level up 2 Pokemon at once. I don't really want them to get too far apart in level, so I'll be swapping back and forth between them a lot to keep them both in the fight. We make our way to Jubilife City, and after doing some watch shopping, we make our way east and run into a rival fight against him. We're right there in level with him, so this isn't by any means a sure thing. You can see his Starly is using Growl to chunk our already somewhat low attack, and it does keep the fight interesting. We don't really have much strategy here. There usually isn't much in the early going. We just have to keep mashing A to use our lone damaging move over and over and over to bring down his team. Given that we are leveling 2 Pokemon, we're going to actually seek out a lot of normally optional trainers that we would normally skip, especially because we're heading to Orberg City and we're going to need as much as we can to defeat Rourke. We eventually find him down in the mines without a Canary, a risky maneuver. Eventually we'll kick him in the seat of his pants and get him back to his gym to do his job. And speaking of kick, we've learned Double Kick at this point, which is super effective against rock Pokemon, so we don't have too much of a hard time against him. That is until the Cranidos comes out and we get knocked out right away. I decide to go north of town and grind up a level or two and then give him another try. Double Kick does about half against Geodude and we're able to bring it down. His Onix is out next and we soften it up a bit with Tail Whip and again do just under half with a Double Kick. He winds up healing with a potion and it brings us down to just 12 HP, but we're able to knock it out and make it to Cranidos again. I bring Anakin in at this point against Cranidos, and this time we're able to make quick work of the battle, thanks in large part to him deciding just not to do damage to us. I'll take it though, that's for sure. From there, we proceed north and pick up a Badoo for Cut later, nicknaming him Snipticus the 62nd, long may he cut, before proceeding to catch a Machop for Strength later, nicknaming him Bicepticus the 62nd, long may he lift. Our next obstacle of the run is our encounter with Team Evil at the Valley Windworks. Commander Mars is out first with a Zubat, so we send out Anakin to use Peck, and it barely chips away at us with Leech Life. I go for a couple setups with Leer, and I'm able to bring it down with just a couple of Pecks after that. We're still at 3/4 health for the Perugly, but it outspeeds us, and we just get off a Leer before it knocks us out. Padme comes in and weathers a feint attack and gets off a powerful Double Kick. A berry and another feint attack later, and we have the opportunity to knock out the fat cat with another Double Kick to bring her down. With Team Evil out of the way, we can proceed north from the Valley Windworks, and our next stop on our whirlwind adventure is Eterna Forest, where we have to escort a small scared child through the big spooky woods. I will say this, it's nice that she heals us after every battle, and it's actually kind of fun that she gets a chansey, so it is what it is. While we're here in the woods, we pick up a Murkrow for Fly later, nicknaming him Flapsity the 62nd, long may he fly. After ditching the scared child at the tree line, we make our way to Eterna City and head for Olive Gardenia at the Endless Soup and Salad Gym. We're poison type, so we should resist her grass moves, and we also have Anakin's Peck for some type advantage. It goes for Safeguard as we peck it again to bring it to a sliver as it just goes for Groan. I don't know whether I meant to write Growth there or Growl, so we'll just leave it in. Gardenia heals with a Super Potion, but this time 2 Pecks are enough to bring it down. Turtwig is out next, and just like that, before we go for Peck. It's doing a little less this time, but we do get hit with Razor Leaf. But again, due to our type advantage, we're staying in the fight just alright. Turtwig does get a crit and a Super Potion heal, but we're able to get 2 Pecks in, including a critical hit of our own for the knockout. Roserade is out next, and we're doing about a quarter with Peck, but it's still the best play. We keep at it as it stun spores us and takes a nip of its citrus berry. It tries Poison Sting for some reason before eventually knocking us out with Magical Leaf. It's only a sliver though, so Padme comes in, and despite getting stun spored herself, we break through for a bite and finish off Gardenia's final Pokemon for the second badge. Before we can leave town though, we have another rocket battle, this time against Commander Gas Giant. Her Zubat is out first and does a bit with a wing attack, but not as much as our 2 horn attacks that finish it off nearly as quickly as it came. Next out is her Trump Take, which starts off as a battle of competing debuffs as it keeps screeching us while we keep leering it. We eventually land, I believe, all 6 Leers, but it also landed 6 Smoke Screens before taking us out with a Night Slash. Padme comes in and survives a Night Slash and lands Fury Swipes. Trump Tank starts using Smokescreen again, but we manage to keep hitting our Fury Swipes and are able to eventually knock it out in about 3 moves. You can see that wasn't without challenge, and in fact this was our 3rd or 4th attempt at trying to get past. I imagine we're going to have to play some setup games at times this run and use Leer or Tail Whip to soften things up for the other. After defeating the next branch of Team Evil, it's time to head around the region for a bit, battling a lot of trainers and using a lot of potions along the way. One nice thing is we don't have to worry about antidotes this run since we're immune to being poisoned. At one point, while working our way through Mount Crumpet, we stop and pick up a Chingling for Flash later, nicknaming her Flashelius the 62nd, long may she shine, and proceed to Hearthome City. The gym leader isn't home yet, because of course she isn't. Why would the gym leaders be in their damn gyms in this game? And in order to get out of town, we have to defeat our rival Tim in a battle. His Starly does big damage with Endeavor, but we're able to get past it with a sliver of health left. Buizel is tanking Bite really well, and using Growl before finally taking us out with Water Gun. Anakin comes in and finishes it up with Horn Attack, and then out comes Monferno. We do solid damage with Peck, but a critical Fury Swipes brings us to a sliver before Mach Punch finishes us off. I also didn't save for a while, so there was actually a lot of backtracking I had to do here to get back to where I was, which sucked. And spoiler alert, that's not the first time this is going to happen. We make our way back to Tim and are still taking big damage from Endeavor. Padme gets past the Starly with a bit more health this time, but is able to do next to nothing to Buizel thanks to Growl, and we wind up having to bring in Anakin to finish it off once again. Monferno is next, and it just manages to keep getting 4 to 5 turn Fury Swipes. It's really quite ludicrous. A Flame Wheel finishes us off, and there's nothing much we can do here. We're kinda stuck. At this level, we don't have any way to beat Tim, but we can't leave town without doing so, and there's no one in town I can battle except Tim to try and gain points to level up. Ultimately, I decide to equip an Oran Berry to each of my Nidoran to use. I don't usually use the berries very much in my runs. I usually think I should save them for tight spots later, but this actually seems like a tight spot now, so we might as well use them. This time we make it to Buizel with a lot more health, and thanks to the berry, we're able to make it to the Monferno still in the green. At this point, I start using Tail Whip to try and soften it up a bit before chunking it down to nearly half with the Fury Swipes. It starts leering us back before its own Fury Swipes bring us down. Anakin comes in and finishes it with a Horn Attack and outlasts his Roselia. A Peck does half as its Mega Drain does virtually nothing to our poison Pokemon. It misses a Stun Spore and we land a Peck to finish the fight. I guess I could have just kept battling Tim over and over again, and every time I lose, just keep the experience by not resetting. But for a couple minutes on stream, I was sitting there going, well, this sucks. I've got a level, but there's literally nothing I can battle except the fight I can't win, and I have to win the fight to go battle anything. Now that we've managed to get past Testy Tim, it's time for a fair bit of filler as we make our way towards Veilstone City. I wind up teaching Shockwave to Padme. No, Anakin never learned Force Lightning, and it's time to head to Maylene at the fighting gym. We're poisoned, so we should resist fighting moves, and we might have the upper hand here. Anakin does a lot of damage with Peck to the opening Meditite after a Leer, but then she sends out a Lucario. And while it is part Steel, which does hurt our chances here, more importantly, it knows Bone Rush for some reason. Pray tell, where is Lucario's bone? Actually, no, wait, never mind, don't answer that. And that's really going to throw a wrench into our plans. Well, a bone, but anyway, yeah, it's going to do super effective damage to us. I'm not sure I ever really understood why poison is weak to ground, but it is what it is, so out comes Padme. And you can see, even though that we got a Leer off on the Lucario, our double kick is doing less than half, and that's not a particularly good sign, especially because we're always one bone thrust away from having a really bad time. We actually managed to get past it with a lucky critical hit, and out comes Macho. We don't do any damage to it to speak of though, and unfortunately it lands all of its rock tombs and it brings us down. I give the fight another go, but the results aren't really any better. In fact, they're worse this time because Lucario's Bone Rush hit 4 times and it just straight knocks us out. I decide that since I've got Shockwave, I might be in a position of success against Crasher Wake, the water gym leader further south. So I fight my way to Pastoria City and give it the old college try. Unfortunately for us, we don't one-shot the Gyarados even though we have a quad-effective Shockwave, even with a critical hit, and he swaps into Quagsire, which does massive damage with Mud Bomb and is immune to Shockwave. Again, with the ground moves. There's always ground moves. Why are there so many ground moves? There's really not much we can do as Mud Bomb is able to knock out both of our Pokemon and bring us down. I do ultimately try the Crasher Wake fight a number of times, but the result is always the same. Gyarados sometimes does damage, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not a one-shot, and then he always swaps into Quagsire after Gyarados tanks the first hit. I try softening up the Quagsire with Tail Whips, but it's just too bulky and it's just too much. I do at one point eventually get past it, but the Floatzel makes quick work of our team afterwards. Shockwave is fine, I guess, but we just don't have good special stats here to make use of it. The Floatzel outspeeds Anakin and brings us down. So since we're not at a good enough level to deal with Maylene or Crasher Wake at this point, it's time to grind. I come back a little bit higher at level 37 and Padme's up first. I'm still outsped by the Gyarados and it hits us with Dragon Rage, and we're still not even doing half damage with Shockwave. Quagsire once again swaps in and I start going with Tail Whip as Quagsire also comes in with Tail Whip. I go for Crunch and it's just doing basically nothing, even after being set up with Tail Whips. I set up some more, but we're just not doing much damage. Even after several Tail Whips, I can only bring the Quagsire down to about half. Anakin comes in and does finish it off with a Poison Jab, but Gyarados is out to barely take damage from that jab, and then swaggers us and heals with a potion. I keep hitting myself as it goes for Bite. We do get a lucky Poison Point activation, but it's too little too late and we lose. I try this fight again and Gyarados Pickle Brines us as we do about 40% with Shockwave. Quagsire steps in and we start going for Tail Whips. At this point, after I use 3, I swap in Anakin just to immediately lose 2/3 of my health to a Mud Bomb. We're able to use a couple of Poison Jabs to bring the Quagsire down though, and out comes Floatzel. It hits us with Ice Fang and Anakin's gone. Padme comes back out, but Floatzel's not taking much damage and we're just being whittled down here. I decide after losing this fight more than once, I go back and try Maylene again. I'm not sure she's going to be any better, but we're really not making any progress here against Crasher Wake, so we might as well try that instead. Like before, Meditite is still out first, and we lead with Anakin. Peck brings it under half as we get hit with Confusion. A second Peck is able to finish it off, and out comes Lucario. I leave Anakin in just to see what kind of damage we can do. Unfortunately, we're still outsped, and Bone Rush still brings us down. Padme is up, and its Drain Punch doesn't do a lot to us, but Padme's Double Kick doesn't even bring it down to half. Eventually we wind up getting Bone Rushed again and again and just lose once more. Again, I'm not even sure why Lucario can learn Bone Rush. Shouldn't that be a Marowak and Cubone exclusive move? I decide and try the fight again, this time with Padme coming in first. I crunch the Meditite and it's a one-shot critical hit. Well, that's nice. I leave her in to face Lucario and we're going to try to soften it up with Tail Whips. We get chunked with Metal Claw a bit and it goes for Bone Rush and once again lands multiple hits, knocking us out. We actually only wound up getting off one Tail Whip and it's back to Anakin. It hits us for Metal Claw, but we counter with a double kick that actually does a lot and finishes it off. Machoke is all that's left, and we go for a peck that does about a quarter. It goes for Foresight for some reason, so we go for Poison Jab and do major damage with that. Maylene goes for a Hyper Potion, but Poison Jab is doing half, and we're able to get off 2 to finish the Machoke and win the fight. I honestly wasn't sure we'd be able to do much in that fight with Bone Rush, but we're able to secure our next badge. So at this point, before we go back to Crash Awake, I decide to use the Versus Seeker and battle this old couple south of Hearthome City over and over again. They pay out reasonably well, and we're gonna need a lot of money shortly for what I'm going to need to defeat Crash Awake. So even though we're taking a page out of the telemarketer scammer's handbook by preying on the old folks, it is for the greater good, so you know what, morally maybe it's okay. Once I have 10,000 coins at the game corner, I go and pick up TM24 for Thunderbolt. It's 95 base power as opposed to Shockwave's 60, so hopefully that's going to help quite a bit. I immediately proceed back to Crasher Wake, the battle resumes, and this time we're outspeeding Gyarados, but we still aren't one-shotting it even with Thunderbolt. This time Crasher heals it instead of swapping immediately to Quagsire, but we still hit ourselves in confusion after we get swaggered. That being said, we are able to actually knock out the Gyarados this time thanks to the heal. Quagsire is out next, and we start using Tail Whip with Padme to soften it up. I get 3 in before dropping to red health, and I swap in Anakin as Quagsire wastes a turn using Mud Sport. Poison Jab does over half as we tank a Mud Bomb at about half. A timely Super Potion though gives us 2 chances to attack, and though our second Poison Jab misses thanks to the accuracy drop, it doesn't attack us and we're able to finish it off the next turn. Last out is Floatzel, and I bring in a weakened Padme back in hopes of being able to do something with Thunderbolt. His Wet Weasel still outspeeds us and goes for Pursuit, leaving us on 1 HP. And you know what, let's just cut to my live stream audio for this one. 1 HP! Wow. Crit it! Crit it! Get a crit and win, come on! Don't squander the opportunity! Crit! Crit! Yes! Yes!
Wow.
Why did I waste all my points on that? This battle, I'll probably need it for the Elite Four later.
That's funny.
I used all my luck points there.
That's hilarious.
All my game calling points, and it finally happened in the middle of a game. In a match that's not really a problem to do. Yep, you heard that right. We survived on 1 HP and managed to get a critical hit Thunderbolt for the win. You couldn't have scripted that any better if you tried, and I would know. I'm literally scripting it right now. We did still have a bit left with Anakin, but we could have also been outsped, and I doubt we would have survived. In any case, before I leave Pastoria City, I do go into the Safari Zone and pick up a Bibarel for our watery needs later. I nickname him Aquades the 62nd. Long may he swim. And after that, it's back to Hearthome City where Fantina waits us in the Ghost Gym. Drifblim is out first, and we do big damage with Crunch, and we get the defense drop. She goes for a Hyper Potion, and now we can one-shot it with a second Crunch. Aftermath does massive damage to us though, and that sets us off to be finished up by the Mismagius with a Shadow Ball. Anakin comes out, but doesn't fare very well, and gets finished off pretty quickly too. Alright, so if we can avoid Aftermath, I think we might be able to do better here, so let's give this another go. Drifblim is back out, and though we decide to avoid the Aftermath with Thunderbolt this time. Unfortunately, although we do big damage with our first Thunderbolt, the Blimp starts setting up Minimize, an odd move for a Blimp to have, I would say. We actually wind up missing our next 2 Thunderbolts, while the Drifblim I actually am pretty sure went for each of the moves it could possibly use, as it hit us with a flinching Astonish, then a Gust, and then an Ominous Wind, while also setting up a third Minimize to boot. Finally, we're able to land another Thunderbolt and bring it down, though this time we're even lower health than before thanks to the misses. Mismagius is out and then goes for a Magical Leaf, and while we tank that and hit back with Thunderbolt, it doesn't do much at all, and then it hits us for Psybeam and we just have to reset. So after 4 more losing attempts, giving us 6 losses in a row, mostly due to us losing to Drifblim's Minimize, I decided to finally change tactics again and go for a berry play once again. I go ahead and equip a Citrus Berry to Padme and try this fight again. Driftblim wings us with Astonish, and we hit it hard with Thunderbolt. She goes for a minimize play again, and we start missing with Thunderbolt. Fortunately, a second Thunderbolt lands, and we actually got past the blimp with 82 HP, and we still have our Citrus Berry. Mismagius goes for the Magical Leaf, which is great news for us, as we hit it really hard with Crunch. It goes for Magical Leaf again, but gets a crit, which triggers our Citrus Berry, although we're able to finish it off with another Crunch. Last out is her Gengar, which tries a pointless Poison Jab against us as we do massive damage with Crunch. That triggers a Hyper Potion, and we bring it low again, but it uses Confuse Ray. Fortunately though, we're able to break through that confusion and crunch the ghost once again to seize the day. You can't punch a ghost, but you can put it in your mouth and chew it. Yeah, that makes sense. This battle took me 7 tries, and it was mostly again due to the terrible accuracy luck once Driftblim started using Minimize. But we also got incredible luck this time with the Mismagius just going for Magical Leaf, a move we resist. I'm not sure why it started doing that when it has Shadow Ball, it's a very solid same type attack bonus move, and Psybeam, which we'd be weak to. I guess the AI just attacks randomly, which sucks for her this time, and we're able to win and secure the next badge, and the ability to use Surf. That may not be great news though, as we're going to have to set us up for a rendezvous with the Steel Gym in short order. But before we can get to the gym, our rival Tim stops and shows up and ambushes us on the bridge for another fight. His Staravia is out first and intimidates Padme, but we use Thunderbolt to bring it to a sliver, but it hits hard with Takedown. Fortunately though, it knocks itself out with the recoil, and out comes Heracross. I swap in Anakin for a quad effective Peck, which brings Heracross low as we weather a Brick Break. Our Poison Point activates, but it doesn't matter as we hit Peck to finish off Tim's Beetle. Monferno is next, so we stay with Tim and get hit with Flame Wheel. That triggers Poison Point again, and Peck brings it down to about half. Another Flame Wheel brings us to 1 HP, but we respond with a Peck to finish the Monferno. Buizel is coming up, so we swap back to Padme. We're outsped, but it only uses Swift as we hit it hard with Thunderbolt for a one-shot. At this point, you can see I spent some time debating if I want to learn Poison Fang, but I ultimately decide not to, and outlasted Roselia, which doesn't do much as we finish it off with 2 crunches and take home a win against Tim. And now things are gonna get interesting. We have to face the Steel Gym, and we don't really have anything super great against it. Yes, we have Double Kick, and that will do super effective damage, but because we're Poison type, we don't get the same type attack bonus, and it is a weak move to begin with. I believe each kick hits for 18 base power, and it hits twice, so we're basically just hitting for a 36 base power move. 72 if you factor in super effective damage, but honestly, if we had a fire move here, it would be much better. As I said, in an ideal world, a fire move, or maybe even a solid ground move would be good here, but alas, Double Kick is probably all we've got. I decided to basically go through the gym one battle at a time and then go heal up. It's slow going because we wind up taking massive damage and usually end up losing at least one of our mons in the fight, but eventually after some careful battling we make our way to Byron at the top of his labyrinth of elevators. He starts off with a Bronzor, which isn't great for us as we don't have anything super effective, but we do have Crunch, which does solid damage, and we do get the defense drop. We wind up confused, but because of the defense drop, we're able to knock it out after snapping out of confusion. Bastiodon is out next, so I try to go for some Tail Whips against it, but it just keeps going for Iron Defense. And truthfully, we're getting nowhere slowly. Iron Defense raises defense by 2 stages, Tail Whip only brings it down by 1. Eventually, he swaps to Flash Cannon and decides for some reason to try and rest at least a couple of times while at full HP. That's some Gen 1 Blaine AI action there. I go for Double Kick, but he rests and immediately heals the damage we did and wakes up with a Chesto Berry. He goes for Ancient Power and that brings us to a sliver, but he gets the all-around stat raise before another Ancient Power finishes Padme off. I bring in Anakin and go for Double Kick this time, doing much better damage because it has much higher attack. We do get hit with Flash Cannon for most of our health, but a full restore allows us 2 Double Kicks to finish off the Bastiodon and outlast his Steelix. Unfortunately, it's not Steel Rock like Bastiodon, it's Steel Ground, which means we're not going to do as much damage, and Steelix notably has a much higher defense stat than Bastiodon does. Sure enough, we aren't doing a ton of damage to it, and it goes for Dragon Breath and then sets up Sandstorm. It finishes us off with a Gyro Ball, and that ends the fight. I was honestly pretty close here though, so I think a bit of strategic setting up and we can do this better without having to grind any. Our third attempt though, the Bronzor goes for Flash Cannon, and we get a timely critical hit that lets us bring it down with just 2 crunches. Now Bastiodon is out, so I swap off Padme to drop off the debuff, but also to use Double Kick from Anakin on the Bastiodon with our much better attack stat. We can actually 2-shot it, which we proceed to attempt to do, but it goes for rest halfway through. We get a critical hit Double Kick, and that leaves it with a sliver, but it fights back with Flash Cannon. At this point though, Byron triggers a full restore, and that gives us the 2 sets of Double Kick we need to finish off the Bastiodon. Now that brings out Steelix, and it's time for some strategic setting up. I go ahead and swap in Padme just to wiggle her butt with Tail Whip and see what kind of softening up we can do against against the Steelix. Surprisingly, it doesn't know Earthquake, and instead goes for Dragon Breath, Gyro Ball, and Ice Fang. We're weathering them quite nicely, and when the Steelix could have knocked us out, it instead set up a Sandstorm, which we managed to survive again on a single HP, and that allows us to get our 6th and final Tail Whip in. I didn't expect to get that many in, but I'll absolutely take it. At this point, Steelix has had its defense lowered all the way, and we can bring in Anakin. I've also equipped Anakin with the Fist Plate, which will boost fighting damage by 20%, and with all of those factors in play, we actually managed to one-shot the Steelix with a single use of Double Kick. Well, not a single kick, but one actual use of Double Kick. Anyway, that's not bad if I do say so myself. But let's be frank here, if Padme was wiggling her butt in front of you for 6 turns, you'd probably find your guard being let down too. After that though, we do have a spot of bother against Commander Mars at Lake Verity. I lose Padme quick enough and find myself with only Anakin against her Perugly. Its final slash brings us down to just 1 HP, but much like with Crash Awake earlier, we survive on 1 HP and respond with a critical hit knockout for the win. That seems to be a recurring theme here. I cannot believe this has happened 2 or 3 times now. After that, there's a lot of mountaineering as we have to make our way north to Snow Point City, and we find our way through the blizzard to make our way to the Ice Gym against Candace. Snover is out first, and it whips up a hailstorm, but we one-shot it with Anakin's Poison Jab. Next out is Medicham, for some reason, at the Ice Gym, and it goes for Detect, blocking our Poison Jab. I swing again, and it lands another Detect. We swap to Leer, and it goes for Force Palm, which gets it poisoned from our Poison Point. It again goes for Detect as we try to go back for Peck, but get blocked again. Another Detect blocks another Peck, and now a third one blocks a third Peck. Candace then heals with a Hyper Potion as we finally get a Peck off to and finally inflict some damage. Our health is fading fast though, and she gets in a Force Palm to knock us out. I bring in Padme, who gets off a Thunderbolt as the Medicham goes for bulk up, so we knock it out. Next out is Sneasel, and it gets us with a weak slash, and we hit hard with a double kick for the one-shot. Last out is Snowbomba, and we're just above half health. I opt for a crunch that doesn't do much, and we get swaggered. This results in a loss as we hit ourselves in confusion, take damage from Avalanche, then lose to hail damage. If we hadn't hit ourselves in confusion, we could have probably won with the attack boost from Swagger and a double kick. We shouldn't have much trouble here though, let's give this another try. Snover versus Anakin again, and we one-shot it with Poison Jab. Medicham is up again, but this time we swap into Padme right away. It detects again, and we burn a Thunderbolt. It detects a second time, and we waste another Thunderbolt. For its third move, it swaps to Ice Punch, and this time we go for Thunderbolt, and we each trade about half damage. It does 2 more detects as we keep wasting our power points. Finally, it fails its third detect, and we're able to land a second Thunderbolt to bring it down. Sneasel is next, and it taunts us as we go for double kick to one-shot it once again. Last out again is the Snowbomba, which we outspeed and chunk a decent bit with double kick. It responds with a Wood Hammer though, and that knocks us down. Anakin comes in though, so we go for Poison Jab, and we get the knockout and the 7th badge. That was honestly kind of annoying, and I guess that's really the Medicham's purpose here, to stall behind Detect and just wait out the hail damage. If you're wondering what the difference is between Detect and Protect, they're essentially the same move. Detect is fighting type, technically, and it does have half the power points of Protect, which is a normal move, but otherwise they do the same thing. Each subsequent use makes the likelihood less to succeed, so when Medicham got off 3 in a row, that third one only had a 1 in 4 chance of succeeding. Now that we've gotten 7 gym badges, we're able to proceed through the Team Evil hideout and take on Cyrus once again. Murkrow is up first and hits hard with Drill Peck, but we hit harder with Thunderbolt. He heals with a Super Potion, and we're able to Thunderbolt it again for the knockout. His Golbat is next, and we stay in for Thunderbolt again after Golbat misses a Supersonic. We end up dropping to about half health after Golbat lands an Air Cutter. I fire off another Thunderbolt, and that brings the Golbat red, and Cyrus triggers a Super Potion. We use another Thunderbolt to bring it low, and we weather a critical hit bite on a Sliver. We're able to finish off the Golbat, and out comes a Sneasel, so we stay in with Padme as it goes for Quick Attack to finish us off. Anakin comes in to avenge his wife's death, and takes a Screech before almost one-shotting the Sneasel with just half a double kick. Cyrus is quickly defeated with the other half of the double kick, and we're now free to roam and challenge him again at the top of Mount Crumpet. Or we would be if it weren't for another Team Evil commander standing in our way. Commander Saturn returns, but you can see that we're able to defeat him as well. I honestly find it weird from a story perspective that the Team Evil boss just lost to us and told us how much he respected us and even gives us a Master Ball for defeating him, but now we go in the next room over and we still have to fight one of his underlings. We're able to defeat him though without a ton of trouble, and now we can follow Cyrus to the top of Mount Crumpet. But before I do that, I still decide to go take some more money from the deep pockets of the 2 rich old people that I did earlier. I need another fairly expensive TM from the Veilstone department store. After getting enough money to buy enough coins, I then go and pick up the TM for Ice Beam. It's going to be a vital item to have for the rest of our adventure, especially when we wind up at the Elite Four. Once I arrive at the top of Mount Crumpet, I find Cyrus releasing Dialga from, honestly, wherever the hell it's been, and it's time for us to do battle and save the day. or it's not. We actually have to get through this double battle featuring 2 Team Evil commanders. And that might sound daunting, but don't worry, our rival Tim has been following us the whole time and appears at our side to make this an even fight. And honestly, I'm going to save a wee bit of time here and tell you that this fight isn't worth narrating, at least not at this point. The commanders lead with Bronzors, which were already super annoying as it is. We lead with Anakin and Tim sends out a Munchlax. And this is honestly where things just grind to an absolute halt. We are 10 levels higher, but we don't do a ton of damage to them, and they outdamage us with extra sensory. Munchlax also doesn't do much but sit there and be annoying. Now it can use Body Slam, but that's nigh useless against steel types, and even more useless when you consider Munchlax has terrible stats. It can also use Screech, which would be nice if it could hit both at once, but it doesn't, it only hits one. And it can also miss outright. What the Munchlax does tend to do in runs after this one, which is already a loss, is that it just sits there and uses Stockpile and Swallow. I'm also very low on power points with Padme. I ultimately decided to just leave this fight, go back down to a Pokemon Center, heal up, and come back. I do manage to knock out about half of their Pokemon, which was a good first attempt, but that shows we've got a long way to go because we're not able to finish them all off. Tim does have more useful Pokemon like a Staraptor, which no close combat, which would be super helpful on the Perugly, but his Munchlax is just in the way. And sometimes it doesn't even matter what he has because both Bronzors will sometimes just extrasensory me and knock me out very quickly. The fact is Bronzor is honestly a thorn in our side, as we don't know anything that's going to be super effective against them and our stats just aren't there to stay in a fight with them very long. After a few failed attempts, I ultimately decide that we just aren't going to be able to do this fight at our current level. There's honestly just too much working against us and we're not doing enough damage to overcome it. I come back to the commanders a slightly higher level, but this time I've equipped Anakin with Dig, a super effective move against Steel. And unfortunately for us, I didn't realize that Bronzors have Levitate. So Dig is pointless against them. Of course they have Levitate, why wouldn't they? I assumed that they perhaps operated like Magnemite, you know, the other floating steel Pokemon that does not have Levitate. But nope, these floating metal Pokemon do have Levitate. Of course they do. So I try a different strategy by having Padme come in first, perhaps use Crunch against them. And it is marginally better, but still not doing much in the way of progress. I can knock out one Bronzor and do good damage to the other, but I can't get past both before being knocked out. We're honestly in the same boat we were before. It's Skuntank with Perugly, and our health is in danger. A little more luck, and I managed to actually get to the final Golbat, but because Tim knocked out the wrong Pokemon, my Dig is now ineffective against Golbat, and if I had chosen Thunderbolt or Ice Beam, which I would have had I known we would only have Golbat left, I might have been able to win here. But nope, we still keep losing here, and truth be told, that was honestly as close as I would come for about 2 hours. I just keep losing over and over and over. I really just kept hoping RNG would roll in our favor and they'd maybe just attack Tim's Pokemon more than they'd attack mine, but it just doesn't go that way. Munchlax again just keeps sitting around for most of the battle doing nothing but using Stockpile. We just keep getting extra sensoried into the ground though. I come back to the commanders with my Nidoran both at level 60 and try this battle again. And honestly, even at this level, we still aren't making much of a difference than we were earlier. I have the black glasses on Padme to boost her Crunch and the icicle plate on Anakin to boost Ice Beam, but neither are really helping here. We are still getting bogged down considerably. If only Tim didn't lead with Munchlax, we might actually be able to do something, as the rest of his team, like I said before, is actually quite useful. Finally, I've had enough, and I just decide that, you know what? Modern problems require modern solutions. I reset the battle and try again, this time with an unorthodox strategy. The battle opens, but instead of going for the Bronzors, I turn my attack against Munchlax and use Anakin to bring it to a sliver with Poison Jab. One of the Bronzors then hits it with extra sensory and knocks it out. That will force Tim to bring in a better Pokemon, and sure enough, it brings in Infernape. All this time, he had a fire Pokemon and wasn't using it here. His Infernape is nearly able to one-shot a Bronzor, and we finish the fight with a Thief. I tank another extra sensory and in comes Perugly. It slashes us, but the Infernape goes for close combat to one-shot the Perugly. As I said before, this is a pretty super damn useful Pokemon he had hiding on the bench. I thief the Bronzor for a tad, and then it extra sensories Tim's Infernape. Golbat comes out next, and Infernape finishes the Bronzor off with Flame Wheel. That's good. Golbat uses Bite on the Infernape. That is also good. and that lets us get off an Ice Beam against Golbat. That'll bring it to a sliver, and a second Golbat appears. Infernape goes ahead and finishes off the first one with a close combat, well, because okay, and we outspeed the second one to get off an Ice Beam for the knockout. Last out is Trump Tank, and the Infernape gets off a Will-O-Wisp as we go for Dig. Trump Tank does finish off the Infernape, and in comes Staraptor. It goes for close combat, bringing Trump Tank to about half as it uses close combat itself. It gets off a close combat, which brings the Trump Tank to about half, and it fires back an attack of its own. A Citrus Berry later, and our Dig lands a critical hit, scoring the knockout and a win. And dear God, that was literally over 2 hours of attempts, in real time mind you, to beat these two commanders. And wouldn't you know it, our first attempt where we attack our allies' Munchlax instead of just attacking the enemy led us to victory. Friendly Fire succeeded today. Immediately after that fight is another battle with Cyrus. Tim heals us between fights, but you can see in this initial fight we're actually going to wind up losing to Cyrus. Part of that was my failure to swap into the Gyarados properly, but also just some unfortunate move choices went against us. Ultimately, that means we're going to have to redo the double commander fight as well, as there's nowhere to save between the two fights. Once we have to reset though, I try my strategy against the double commanders, and once again it just so happens that knocking out the Munchlax on our own leads to victory over the Grunts. I'm honestly not sure why the rival isn't programmed to swap out his Munchlax. He has Pokemon that are far better on his team, but he doesn't appear to, so you know what? Like I said, desperate times call for desperate measures. I make it back to Cyrus again, but once again you could see it just doesn't go our way for the second time in a row. Largely due to multiple flinches from the Crobat. And I'll be perfectly frank at this point, we wind up losing to Cyrus 7 times, and I have to go back through the double commander battle each time to get back to him. But to make it somewhat interesting, 6 of the 7 times I went back through those commanders, I was able to win on the initial attempt by, you guessed it, knocking out the Munchlax myself first. I know it's clearly not the way you're supposed to do double battles, but hey, it's not my fault that for this battle, the best winning strategy in the game is to knock out your ally first before attacking your enemy. Finally, on what I believe was our 8th attempt at Cyrus, we get this run. Honchkrow is out first, so we send out Anakin and Ice Beam and do big damage, but it responds with Embargo. Cyrus uses a Super Potion, but that keeps it in range of another Ice Beam for the knockout. Gyarados is coming out next, so we swap into Padme for Thunderbolt, which does over half, while Gyarados goes for Ice Fang for a bit of damage. A second Thunderbolt is able to bring down the Gyarados as Cyrus sends in his Crobat. So after a moment of thought, I stay in with Padme and go for Thunderbolt. Crobat starts with Bite, but doesn't get a flinch, and our Thunderbolt does about half. Crobat goes for Confuse Ray, and we wind up hitting ourselves. Crobat then goes for a Cross Poison, which we resist, but it does land for a critical hit. I break through Confusion and hit back with Thunderbolt. And you know what? Let's just cut back to stream audio for this one.
Oh, well, fiddle-dee-dee. It ain't gonna knock it out, but fiddle-dee-dee.
Unless it's a crit.
Yeah, I wouldn't get that. Quiet, you.
Yep, I got another crit for another knockout. Awesome. Last out is Weavile, which outspeeds us with an Ice Punch and knocks out Padme. Anakin's back in, and Weavile goes for X-Scissor, which we resist. I go for Poison Jab, bringing it under half, and it heals with Citrus Berry. It then goes for X-Scissor again for some reason, which again we resist, and it takes on poison damage. We go for Poison Jab to finish it out, and we'll knock it out for the win. It's really important to note here that not only did the Crobat go favorably with the critical Thunderbolt, the Weavile not going for Ice Punch against Anakin was massively helpful. In a previous attempt, it did over 100 points of damage, so if it had just bothered to use Ice Punch, we would have certainly lost there. But hey, you know what? Sometimes you win, and sometimes your opponent just loses. I'll take it either way. After defeating Team Evil, we go ahead and knock out the Dialga and send it packing, and we could finally get on with the show. So after that took nearly 3 hours to deal with in real time, it's time to proceed east and take on the final gym of the run, the Electric Gym. Faulkner leads with Raichu, which doesn't do much with Brick Break as we hit hard with Poison Jab, but we end up getting static. I attempt an Ice Beam trying to plan for a heal, but it then sets up Light Screen and our Poison Jab should knock it out, which it does. Ambipom comes out next, so we swap to Padme and trade a Thunderbolt for a Shockwave, but basically do nothing thanks to the Light Screen I forgot about. We get critical hit and our Crunch also does next to nothing. It starts buffing with Nasty Plot, and I go for a Tail Whip to try and combat it a bit. Ambipom then Baton passes into Octillery. Sludge Bomb doesn't do much against it, thanks again to the Light Screen, and we outsped for a Thunderbolt, but still don't knock it out, but Octazooka does knock us out. A paralyzed Anakin comes back in, gets outsped predictably for a one-shot Octazooka. Several failed attempts later, and I get this run that starts out radically different. Anakin is out first against the Raichu. Raichu this turn immediately outspeeds us, which it hadn't been doing in all previous attempts. It now goes for Thunder Wave, which immediately paralyzes us and forces us to use the Cherry Berry I equipped earlier than I had planned. I go for Dig and it sets up the light screen again. I bring it low at Dig, but he heals with a Hyper Potion that he also hadn't used in previous runs to heal back up. Our Poison Jab brings him low though, and now he's poisoned to boot. I'm low on power points though, so I debate my move and I try for Dig as we get paralyzed again. Poison Point brings it to a sliver as it misses Charge Beam, and Dig fails due to paralysis. Poison damage brings down the Raichu though, and out comes Ambipom. It goes for Shockwave, and we go for Poison Jab. The Ambipom goes for Baton Pass into Luxray despite not doing anything with its stats yet. Poison Jab brings it to just over half as we get the secondary poisoning. Luxray heals with Citrus Berry and then hits hard with Thunderfang, and we're paralyzed again. It goes for a Charge Beam and knocks us out. Padme comes in and does a tad with Crunch as we get Thunder Waved. Again, our Cherry Berry heals us, and now the Luxray's in the red, so we go for Sludge Bob to finish it off. Next up is the Ambipom again, and this is where it gets pretty odd. It just starts going for stat modifying moves. Nasty Plot and Agility. Volkner even full restores at one point as we start chipping away. But that's again all Volkner does. It just keeps boosting its stats. I get why, I assume it wants to use Baton Pass into Octillery, but it never does. He just keeps buffing himself and we're eventually able to knock him out. Octillery is out last and it doesn't have any of the buffs from Baton Pass since Ambipom never did one. Thunderbolt brings it to about half and we do get the paralysis. It breaks through though for an Octazooka that does over half of our health. We lose a bit of accuracy, but we manage to land a Thunderbolt and leave it on a sliver. Octillery is paralyzed and Volkner can't heal, but we also miss our move. We then get a lucky paralysis again from the Octillery, and this time we do manage to land our Thunderbolt for the knockout and the win for our final badge of the run. That was great. So many, if not all of these gym battles have taken multiple tries to win. Nothing has been easy up to this point, and the Elite Four is surely going to be no cakewalk by any stretch. Saying of which, before even trying the Elite Four, I'm going to need to be a dramatically higher level. I decided to not even try the Elite Four until I reach level 75 with both of the Nidoran. We have been struggling all run with even the gyms, so I don't want to guess how bad the Elite Four is going to be. This does involve a lot of grinding, but it doesn't honestly take an obtusely amount of time to do, as we can grind in Victory Road for Anakin and in the waters around it for Padme pretty easily. And since there's a Pokemon Center right there at the entrance, it's actually a very solid spot for grinding both of them up. I also take time to pick up the Magnet to boost Thunderbolt, as well as various elixirs and ethers that we'll probably need as we move through the Elite Four. Finally, after much crisscrossing the region, picking up what we need, we are ready for the Elite Four. And by that, I mean we're finally ready to face off against Tim for the final battle beforehand. And honestly, there's not much to say here. We get our butts kicked. Even though we're between 20 and 30 levels higher than his Pokemon, he is still kicking our butts. Our Nidoran must have really piss poor stats if that's the results we're getting. It doesn't help that we're not one-shotting anything either. For the record, we're about 30 levels higher than Staraptor, we have a Magnet equipped which boosts electric moves by 20%, and Thunderbolt is super effective against it, and we still aren't one-shotting it. Yes, it's close, it's right there on the edge, and it may even be in an unfavorable range, but we just aren't getting it. I decided to level my Nidoran up even further and try this battle again. So because I'm getting super frustrated at this point in the run, I just level everybody up to 85 and come back again. This is getting sad at this point, but I'm honestly tired of these battles never going our way. Staraptor is out first again, and this time we are finally able to one-shot it with Thunderbolt. That dramatically changes the complexion of things, and out comes Snorlax. I decide not to even try attacking for damage as it'll just rest, and I instead go back to my patented Padme butt wiggling and use Tail Whips. Snorlax is going for Crunch, but we're hanging in the fight pretty well until it decides to go for Earthquake. I managed to get 3 Tail Whips in though, so that should be enough for Anakin to work with. I go ahead and use Poison Jab and get a lovely one-shot on the Snorlax. Floatzel comes out next and drops our defense with a Crunch, but we go for Poison Jab and then get the one-shot on Floatzel. Heracross comes out and we again go for another Poison Jab, which brings it low and inflicts the poisoning. It goes for Aerial Ace and drops down to a sliver with poison as we finish it with Thief. Next out is an Infernape, and we go for Poison Jab, which brings it under half, and it fights back with Focus Blast. We resist it fortunately and are able to finish it with a final Poison Jab. Last out is Roserade, and thank crap we were able to one-shot it with Ice Beam for the knockout and the win. With all of that, we are finally able to take on the Elite Four. Bug Master Twink Aaron is out first with Dustox. I go for Thunderbolt with Padme and it's doing about a third. It goes for Bug Buzz and we do good damage with Crunch. Another trading of Bug Buzz and Crunch and we're able to knock out the Dustox. Next out is Beautifly, so I swap in Anakin and go for Ice Beam and get a nice one-shot. Next out is Heracross, so I stay with Anakin and opt for a Poison Jab. We do over half with it as we weather a Night Slash and another Poison Point is able to do its job. Aaron is able to go for a full restore though, so now we're able to two-shot it with the Poison Jabs for the win. Vespiquen is out next, so we go for Ice Beam and bring it to red as it goes for Defense Order. Aaron full restores here, but our Ice Beam is doing over half, so we're able to two-shot it after the heal for the knockout. Last out is Drapion, which it hits with a cross poison for minimal damage, and we go for Dig. He heals with a Citrus Berry, and we just set up another Dig after being hit with Aerial Ace. It's not enough to knock it out though, and it does use Ice Fang and manages to freeze us. This is just such an example of how this run has gone, and eventually Drapion is able to finish us off. Padme comes out and tanks an Aerial Ace for almost no damage, and we finish it off with Thunderbolt for the win. Well, at least that's a critical must-win battle that we finally won with a first try victory. Next out is Bertha, the ground trainer, and yeah, ground is going to be a problem for two Pokemon who are in fact weak to ground. Again, I've never understood that type matchup, but it's what we've got. Bertha starts with Quagsire, which means really our best choice is to go for a neutral Ice Beam against it. We need to save our Ice Beam power points though, as we also are going to need it for several of her other Pokemon. You can see that at one point I start going for Dig as it starts going for Dig, and we just end up digging past each other, much like that meme where the two people drive next to each other. In any case, it's a lot of back and forth on the Quagsire before knocking it out and finally getting to Hippowdon. It knows Earthquake, which is a run ender, but this time seems to want to keep using Curse and Crunch. Eventually it does knock us out and we go to Anakin to finish it with Ice Beam. Golem's not much of a problem as it's weak to Ice Beam and goes down without a hassle. Wishcash would be a problem, but we managed to get a clutch freeze and are able to whittle it down at our leisure. Last out is Sudowoodo, and a little birdie told me over my shoulder to just use Poison Jab instead of Ice Beam. I don't think we'd have knocked it out with Ice Beam, but we could have potentially gotten another freeze here, which would have changed the tide of this battle. All the luck was going our way, and we lost because we used Poison Jab, but honestly, I don't think Ice Beam would have knocked it out in one hit. We would have probably lost either way. I decided at this point to level up to 90 and try Bertha again. Right back on the horse, and here we are again. Quagsire comes out again, and we have another lovely little battle of Protect, Stalling, Sandstorm damage, and passing each other in dig tunnels. Bertha burns a full restore here, and we're able to knock it out after some parallel dig shenanigans. Next out is the Hippowdon, which we're able to two-shot with Ice Beam while it just decided to go for Curse. Golem is out next, so we go for Ice Beam, which does more than half, and we weather a critical hit Brick Break. I take a bit of a gamble here and go for Dig, hoping that it won't go for Earthquake so that we can save our Ice Beam power points. It doesn't go for Earthquake, and we bypass a Gyro Ball to knock it out. Wishcash is next, and we hit a couple of Ice Beams, and it knocks us out with Rock Slide. Padme is out, so Bertha goes for a full restore as we start laying in crunches. I get a defense drop, which is great, as that lets us knock it out in 2 hits, and we're actually at almost full HP for the Sudowoodo again. I go for Crunch to see what it's doing, and it's doing about a quarter as we take a Hammer Arm. I decide to try Thunderbolt since I have the Magnet equipped, and that's doing more than Crunch is. A second Hammer Arm keeps us in the fight as we withstand a Sucker Punch too, and we get off a Thunderbolt to defeat Bertha. We are halfway through the Elite Four, but that was not an encouraging time. Maybe Flint the Fireman will be easier. He leads with a Rapidash, and we counter with Anakin. We are 42 levels higher, mind you, almost double the Rapidash's level, and it still outspeeds us and goes for Sunny Day. We go for Dig, and it goes for Bounce. Well, that just happened. We get hit with said Bounce for moderate damage, so let's try this again. Unfortunately, the AI is smarter than the average bear, and it repeats the process, so you know what, I just decided to try again. If you were at the stream, you would know I was pissed at this point, which is why I didn't try and play this run through. This is just not going well at all. Second attempt at Flint, and we skip Dig and just go for Poison Jab after Sunny Day, and it brings the Rapidash to red. That prompts a full restore here, so we go back for Dig to avoid a Flare Blitz. This time Dig lands, but it isn't enough to one-shot even though it's super effective. I go for Thief to save on power points as it hits for nearly 200 points of damage with the Sunny Day boosted Flare Blitz. At least the recoil knocked it out though. Lopunny is out next, and this one we do outspeed. We land a Poison Jab, but it's only doing a bit less than half. Fortunately, it goes for Mirror Coat, which only affects special moves, so it fails. Sunny Day fades, and we're able to bring down the rabbit with a second Poison Jab. Infernape is next though, and it outspeeds us and hits for Earthquake. You could see I was going to try for Dig, but even if we had outsped, we would have been underground and taken double the damage from Earthquake and lost even more than we lost there. I bring in Padme, but again, Earthquake is just too much of a run-ender. At one point I try Flint again and actually squeak by the Infernape to do good damage against the Steelix, but this is just not a good fight. The fact that Infernape knows super effective Earthquake is a big problem for two Pokemon who absolutely can't take it. We just take too much damage. I actually try at one point seeing if Aerial Ace on Padme might help, but it wouldn't. Again, we are 30 to 40 levels higher than his Pokemon, but we are not doing enough damage to them fast enough as they are just annihilating us. You could see at one point we got so frustratingly close. We got to his last Pokemon, a Drifblim, but it burnt us with Will-O-Wisp, which is only 85% accurate, mind you. Then it just started setting up double teams. We could not hit it. You can see we survived his damaging attack Ominous Wind. It's the only damaging move he can use on a patented 1 HP, but we learned to the booze damage. But we lose to the burn damage. We were tantalizingly close at one point, but we lost to the burn. If it hadn't burnt us, we would have probably been able to hang in the fight. When it rains, it pours. Fortunately, after several overall failed attempts at Flint, we get this attempt that puts itself together nicely. Rapidash versus Padme again charges Solar Beam while we go for Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb just misses doing half as we tank the Solar Beam for only about 30 damage. Our Sludge Bomb will bring it to a sliver, but we get a poison, and with the poison damage, we're able to knock out the Rapidash. Lopunny is out next and sets up Sunny Day, so we go for Crunch, hoping to get a defense drop. It doesn't do much, but of course it has the Cute Charm ability, and now we're Infatuated. We managed to break through Infatuation and land a critical hit Crunch to bring it just above red health, but we take a Sunny Day boosted Fire Punch in the process. Our next Crunch just misses enough to knock it out, and Flint triggers a full restore. We for the third time break through Infatuation to land a critical hit Crunch for this time half damage, and at this point, Flint withdraws it in place of an Infernape. Our Crunch does virtually nothing to the Infernape, but we do get a defense drop as the Sunny Day fades. Infernape goes for Earthquake though, and that's enough to bring us to red, but we fire back a Sludge Bomb. It does a decent amount, but unfortunately he heals back with a Citrus Berry. Infernape tries to finish us off with another Mach Punch because it knows we're in red health, but because we resist it, we're able to survive, and we get off a Sludge Bomb, and that finally lands a poison on the Infernape. It now tries for Thunder Punch, which does knock us out, and it brings Anakin back into the fight. He goes for Mach Punch, and we bring it down with a Poison Jab. I thought she might go for a full restore there, but I guess not. Next out is the Lopunny from earlier, but because Pokemon can't be gay, we can't be infatuated, so we're able to Poison Jab it without fear of Cute Charm and bring it down. That just leaves Steelix and Drifblim. Steelix is out, and we know we can two-shot it with Ice Beam, but we want as much HP as possible for Drifblim. Fortunately for us, Ice Beam lands a critical hit, and we're able to one-shot the Steelix. We now have a lot of HP left for Drifblim, but we only have 2 Ice Beams left. I go for the first one, and it brings it low, but it's not enough to knock it out, as it lands a Will-O-Wisp, burning us again. That sucks, because Flint now full restores, and we're down to 1 last Ice Beam. And not only will we be taking burn damage, but our attack is cut, meaning we won't do much damage with what we'll have left. We use the last of our Ice Beams, and then I opt for Poison Jab, but you can see we're still leaving it with a sliver. Fortunately, the Poison Jab does poison it, and we survive his subsequent Ominous Wind, which allows the poison to do its job and finish the fight. That was another brutal matchup, thanks largely in part to Infernape having Earthquake for some reason. And now we have the Psychic Elite Trainer Lucio up. Surely he won't drop the beat and hold us at bay, will he? Surely 2 Poison-type Pokemon aren't at a disadvantage against a Psychic Trainer, and you can see we're actually doing pretty well to start. Mr. Mime and Girafarig really aren't problems at all, and neither is the Alakazam, providing that it misses. We're able to actually use Crunch to pretty much get our way through them without too much trouble. Unfortunately, the bane of our existence returns again in Bronzong. Remember all those Bronzors we had such a wonderful time against earlier? Yeah, well now they're back, and in bigger form. You can see we aren't doing squat to it, and it knows Earthquake of all things. I think if you're using Levitate, you shouldn't be allowed to use ground moves. And you can see it knocks us out, and then in a move that just royally fucks me off, we're back at Flint again. So apparently I didn't save after beating him, and I had to go back to Flint. I was so pissed here. You have no idea how infuriating this run has been. I decided to level them both up to 95 just to try and give them even a little more oomph and see if this helps in any way. I mean, if nothing else, we'll have a little more HP. So it actually takes 3 more tries to get past Flint again before we're able to get up to Lucian again. I need something more useful than Thief at this point, since we're really only using that to farm a Lucky Egg earlier anyway. So I give Anakin, who has our best physical attack, the move Shadow Claw. It's a physical ghost type move, but it's almost double the power of Thief, so this might actually help here against the Psychic team, which it'll be super effective against. But you'll see that more often than not, we do make it back to the Bronzong time after time, just for it to Stonewall us. Or I guess Metal Wall us. The first 3 Pokemon aren't an issue, though I do have to reset if the Alakazam lands a Psychic, which it will over and over again. In fact, I think there was a point where 5 or 6 times in a row, Alakazam suddenly remembered it could do Psychic, when previously it kept missing with Focus Blast. If it hits, we'll be one shot and we won't have enough health left to deal with the Bronzong, even in theory. So it really becomes a game of trying over and over until we can get to the Bronzong, and just trying to smash it over and over until we can win. I mean, I don't think there's anything we can do here strategy-wise. It's just brute force and hope something happens. I mean, that's honestly pretty much how I play pool, too. I hit the cue ball as hard as I can and hope something goes into a pocket. So at this point, Lucy and leads with Mr. Mime and we bring out Anakin. No doubts here, Shadow Claw is a super effective one-shot and it brings it down. Next out is Alakazam, so I stay in with Anakin. Fortunately, it finally remembers to go back for Focus Blast, which misses, and that allows us to go for Shadow Claw to bring it down. Out next is Girafarig, which is part normal, so it's immune to Ghost, so I swap in Padme to use Crunch. I don't one-shot it, but I do get a defense drop as it hits for Shadow Ball. Doesn't do a ton because it's not a Ghost type itself, but we get our special dropped, and Lucian goes for a full restore. Because of our physical drop, though, we are now able to one-shot it with Crunch, and now that it's been healed, we're up against Bronzong. I decided at this point to swap into Anakin and just go for Brute Force Shadow Claw. It does about a quarter, and we're taking solid damage from Gyro Ball. I nearly knock it out with a critical hit Shadow Claw, but it heals with Citrus Berry. It then goes for Calm Mind, boosting its special stats. I go for another Shadow Claw that brings it to a sliver once again, and it sets up another Calm Mind. Lucian then triggers another full restore here, and we hit it another Shadow Claw. Fortunately, this was another good critical hit, which brought it down low, and then another Shadow Claw brings it to red, and it just seems intent on boosting again and again with Calm Mind. I'm not going to complain if it means I can do damage without getting some in return. Finally, I get another critical hit, though this one wasn't necessary, and are able to bring it down with a final Shadow Claw. Last out is Medicham, and we swing hard with Poison Jab, and finally land a critical hit for a one-shot with Poison Jab for the knockout. And with that, the Elite Four has now been finally completed. I heal up and try to push on to Cynthia. She has a varied team with a lot of things to stop us, but let's give it a try. Spiritomb is out first, and in Gen 4 it literally has no weaknesses, being a Ghost Dark dual type, so we just try for Ice Beam and it does about a third. It goes for Embargo, which doesn't really impact us, and we go for Shadow Claw. Unfortunately, it then goes for Psychic, which of course it knows, and it gets a critical hit one-shot for the instant knockout. I go ahead and reset here as there's no way Padme is going to solo sweep this team. Unfortunately, our subsequent attempts don't go well either. We are able to get past Spiritomb eventually, as well as her Gastrodon, but Garchomp outspeeds and takes us out with Earthquake. Honestly, this is a battle that a lot is going to have to go right in order for us to win. You can see that Spiritomb is just going to have to be something where we hit as hard as we can with a neutral move and see what happens. I don't have anything that could be super effective against it in this gen. In fact, literally no Pokemon has a move that can be super effective against it in this gen. The good news is if we can get to the Garchomp and survive whatever it uses, I can knock it out with Ice Beam. But again, a lot has to go right to get there. I eventually swap up my strategy and go for Padme against Spiritomb first, and am able to do fair damage with Thunderbolt and progress the team a bit further. Eventually though, we get Lucario and we try to dig, but of course the Lucario knows Earthquake. Why wouldn't it? I make another attempt here, and you can see where I rage quit the stream when I accidentally used Thunderbolt against the Gastrodon. I had been streaming for, at that point, 5 frustrating hours, and I literally just threw my controller down and called it a night. This run had been so frustrating, I was honestly ready to pull my hair out. The next night I picked the stream back up where we left off, and we're still trying to beat Cynthia. After another 45 grueling, frustrating minutes, I get this run where stuff starts finally coming together and the pieces are falling into place. Padme is out first against Spiritomb, and we have the magnet equipped to boost Thunderbolt. We're doing just about half as Spiritomb goes for Embargo. It was at this point when our second Thunderbolt didn't knock it out that I had to check to see if Embargo blocks held items, which it does. I tank a Dark Pulse and she heals the Spiritomb with a full restore. Thunderbolt's not doing as much at this point, so I try for Blizzard, but we miss. Silver Wind is the best thing Spiritomb can do, at least from our perspective, because it does basically no damage to us. I do land Blizzard this time, but it survives on a sliver and hits us with Silver Wind a second time. Embargo falls off now, so we go for Thunderbolt for the sure hit knockout. That wasn't ideal, but I did honestly learn something that I hadn't known about Embargo before. Gastrodon is out next, and it's immune to Thunderbolt, so we go for Crunch. I don't get the defense drop and it goes for Stone Edge. I try another Crunch and we land it, but we also don't get a defense drop here either. Gastrodon for some reason decides Sludge Bomb is a great move to use against my poison type Pokemon, and I go for a third Crunch and get a critical hit that may have mattered, even at that HP, and I bring it down. We're in the red, so it's time to swap into Anakin for the Garchomp. Garchomp has a 25% chance of going for Brick Break here, and we get it, which is the absolute best result. We easily tank the damage and are able to one-shot it with a quad-effective Ice Beam. Out next is Milotic, and we're going to swap back into Padme despite the low health. Milotic does have Mirror Coat, but we go for Thunderbolt hoping for a critical hit that would be a one-shot. I don't get the crit, but for some reason Milotic decides that setting up an Aqua Ring instead of knocking us out by using Mirror Coat or Ice Beam is the better choice. At this point, we land a second Thunderbolt and knock out the Milotic. Lucario is coming in, and we have no choice but to swap back to Anakin. We don't have anything great against Lucario given what moves it can use, and it lands a Psychic for massive damage. If it had gone for Earthquake, we would have probably lost here. I survive on 21 HP, and I take a massive risk going for Dig because, again, it has Earthquake. But we get lucky, and it goes for Dragon Pulse. We have equipped the Soft Sand for a boost to Dig, and the super effective hit lands, and we're able to one-shot the Lucario with Dig. Last out is Roserade, but neither of my Nidoran are at good health at all, and I leave Anakin in for the Ice Beam. Roserade unfortunately survives and hits back with Shadow Ball to knock us out. Roserade is in red health too, and I bring in Padme. I take a moment to debate about whether using my last Blizzard or going for a Sludge Bomb. Ultimately, we decide to go for Sludge Bomb, and Cynthia does full restore. Sludge Bomb does way more than I was expecting though, and it nearly brings it to red, and because we were outspeeding, we're able to get off another Sludge Bomb, and in a somewhat ironic fashion, land a critical hit, granted when we didn't need it, but a critical hit secures the win. And as the credits roll, guys, let me just say this run was beyond frustrating. It took nearly 17.5 real-time hours to complete the recording. Never mind the time it's taken me to record the voiceover and edit. This is going to take me probably a literal full day's worth of time to actually complete everything. Granted, some of that was me pausing to look stuff up, but most of that was just failed attempts after failed attempts. You wouldn't think this run would have been that difficult. On paper, we had decent type coverage with Thunderbolt and Ice Beam and Poison and Sludge Jab, but we were critically weak to Ground and Psychic, and something that's an abundance of in Diamond apparently. So much stuff just randomly has Earthquake, I can't even begin to explain how annoying that was. Not to mention how many Bronzors there were. Honestly, this is the 62nd run I've put up on the channel, and really the 63rd I've actually recorded at the time. I went ahead and bumped this one up the ladder due to Valentine's Day, and I actually already have another run recorded after that, so we've got some content in the pipeline. But by God, was this probably the most frustrating one I've done. And I say that literally as somebody who has beaten Pokemon Fire Red with a Sunkern, the literal worst Pokemon in the entire franchise. I'm just glad we were finally able to beat it below level 100 and without having to resort to something like Double Team. Though truthfully, I don't know when we could have set that up. This was just such a beatdown all the way through. Our stats were god-awful, by the way. For the small percentage of you that are still here, what is probably going to be well over an hour-long video, in case you were wondering why this was going so badly, here were the IVs that we had. Now, I'm not going to bother explaining how it works, but suffice to say, you get a random number between 1 and 31 for each of those stats. 31 being good, 1 being bad. Now look at what we had. It should come as no surprise when you finally see that the IVs were so bad, and that is why we had a garbage time with this run. Honestly, Padme should have had really good special attack, but she had an impish nature which actually reduced the special attack stat, the only thing we had a really good number in. Our special defense, HP, and attack were all god-awful on Padme, which explains why we couldn't do any physical damage with it, and why we were taking so much damage from hits, especially from special moves like Extrasensory. Anakin had a neutral nature with Hardy, but was still worse in 3 of the 5 stats, and even the stats that we were higher in, like HP and attack, were still in the bottom half of the possible options. The only reason Anakin did so much more damage with its physical moves when compared to Padme is because the attack stat was doubled, but one of my favorite quotes from Star Trek is "twice nothing is still nothing," so it wasn't great. I mean, look at that. The fact is we had a defense stat of 2 and a special defense stat of 5 on Anakin. That is why we were being beaten by almost anything the entire run through. We had no defense whatsoever. Again, mind you, the lowest you can get is 1, and we had a 2. That's bad. Having now been victimized by god-awful IVs and stats, I can say that on one hand I do see the benefit of the way J-Rose does it, as he will reset for good IVs and natures when he gets his runs, just so he's not bogged down like this when he makes his videos. But I still disagree with doing that, because if you're going to play Lottery Simulator, then you might as well just adjust your IVs and call it a day. I could have honestly just given both of these Nidoran perfect stats when I put them in, but I didn't. Again, my runs are designed to show that any Tom, Dick, or Harry of a Pokemon can complete the given run, not just a perfectly sculpted Adonis of one. Now granted, that doesn't always work out, case in point with the Cryogonal from before, where I actually had to go and adjust my stats at the end after declaring the run over. But usually, any given Pokemon can beat any given run if given enough time. Again, thank you all so much for coming by. I can look at the recording for the voiceover, and I'm assuming this is going to be at least an hour-long video. So if you stuck around this whole time, comment below what your favorite gummy bear is. And yeah, I have 2 more runs already recorded and needing to be edited. One's a no new moves run, and another is just a nice casual run through Kanto, so be looking for those coming soon. Or soonish. Until next time, guys, good luck though, have fun, and go catch 'em all.